Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the public consultation on the guidelines for the Grants in Aid program for the DOST Startup Grant Fund. I am Catherine Suarez from CDO b.i.t.e.s, your host for this morning session of the public consultation. So before we begin, let's first start the program with a prayer, followed by the singing of the national anthem headed to us by Ms. Geisha Getwaban. So again, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing great and ready for this session. So before we formally start, let's go over some Zoom guidelines. So for the rest of the session, you will be muted by the organizers. So kindly turn off your mic unless you're given the floor to speak, and turn off your camera unless you're asked to. However, we have a designated chat box on the lower part of the screen where you can ask away your questions and communicate. And lastly, just enjoy the rest of the session. So I would not take this long and would now give the virtual floor to Ms. Shiralia Macalbe, the TBI manager of CDO b.i.t.e.s, to give her welcoming remarks.
Mayong buntag sa tanan. Once again, I'm Shore, the manager of Cagayan Business Incubation, Technology, Entrepreneurship, and Startups, otherwise known as Studio Bytes. We are an incubator funded and implemented by the USD Fisher and the University of Science and Technology of the Southern Philippines here in Cagayan de Oro City. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this morning's virtual public consultation on the guidelines for the Grants in Aid program for the DOST Startup Grant Fund. We're thrilled to see you here with us. This morning session, which is intended for our startups, enablers, and the rest of the startup community from Visayas and Mindanao, is co-hosted by CDO Bytes, and in line with that, I'd like to take this opportunity to express our utmost gratitude to DOST and Fisher for trusting our team to be one of its partners for this important event. For a quick recap, the Philippine startup ecosystem has been slowly but surely thriving in the last few years. No doubt, the startup community has steadily grown. In fact, startups and enablers have been making so much noise in the past couple of years, and of course, we still are, that we've gained recognition even at a global stage for the innovation of Filipinos. Come 2019, the government has enacted Republic Act number 11337, also known as the Innovative Startup Act, to support startups and enablers, even giving us a fixed legal definition of what exactly a startup is. This year, despite the challenges of the pandemic, among the 131 economies in the world, the Philippines has rose to the 50th most innovative nation in the 2020 Global Innovation Index. We managed to do this in just 6 years after being ranked 100th in 2014. Of course, this is a joint effort of the startup community because we all know it takes a village to raise a startup. This progress further shows that the resiliency of Filipinos is on another level and how startups, with the help of research, development, and various enablers from the public and private sectors, such as our funding agencies, technology business incubators, stakeholders, can make a huge difference. So this public consultation is significant because this jumpstarts us to the call for applications on the Startup Grant Fund, which DOST Fisher recently kicked off, I believe, last week. This is one of the several means on how the government intends to improve its support for startups and startup enablers in our country. The startup grant is identified as one of the program benefits and incentives under the Innovative Startup Act. This event is crucial because it will be a venue for startups and enablers to inquire and give inputs about the grant. This public consultation is not just a process, but also a venue to improve transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness of the regulations relevant to availing the DOST Startup Grant Fund. Startups all over the country are encouraged to avail of the grant because it aims to help establish initial market traction, get feedback and validation, refine business models, and many more. So each day, innovation grows and ideas are created by individuals, and startups are formed that are eager to make an impact. And how else do we support them? By making sure that those ideas come into fruition. Well, of course, one of the aids is to fund them. With that said, we hope that you listen and learn from the speakers as well as interact with us during this free virtual event because we all understand how funding hugely contributes to the growth and stability of a startup and an enabler. Please use this as a safe space for you to voice out your concerns and ask questions so you can understand better the Startup Grant Fund and how the government can help you as a startup. By the way, this also applies to enablers. So that's it from me. In behalf of CDO Bytes, thank you again for having us open this event. Once again, welcome to the public consultation on the guidelines for the Grants in Aid program for the DOST Startup Grant Fund, and we hope to actively hear from you during the event.
Thank you so much for that, Miss Shore. So let's now head on to the program proper. So let me call on first Ms. Russell Pili, the Chief of b.i.t.e.s Research Information and Technology Transfer Division, to discuss the consultation mechanics or the line-to-line review of the startup guidelines.
Before we go into the good morning, everyone. Uh, so before we go into the line-to-line part of the DOST Grants and Aid Program for Startup Grant Fund, uh, let me first greet everyone. Maayong buntag di ay sa tanan sa atong mga amigo o amiga nga mga from Visayas and Mindanao, and dagang salamat for joining us uh, this early Monday morning. Special shout out to CDO b.i.t.e.s for accepting our request to host this activity amidst the short notice. We actually just planned this like 2 weeks ago. So my name is Edward. I'm from the DOST Shared, and I'm currently the program manager for the DOST of the Shared Startup Grant Fund program. So as I mentioned earlier, before we go through the details of the guidelines for the grants and aid of the DOST Grant Fund program, let me discuss first the call for proposals of Shared for the 2021 Startup Grant Fund program. So Judge Amar, can you, okay. So next slide, please. So just a context, last November 24 at the uh, fourth Technology Business Incubator Summit, which is one of the main events at this year's Philippine Startup Week, we officially launched our Startup Grant Fund program, which has the theme Jumpstarting the Economy in the New Normal. As a response to the demand for quick and rapid solutions adapting to the new normal, we at the DOSTP Shared is renewing or reissuing a more responsive Startup Grant Fund program where we hope to support startups with technology-based solutions that can potentially contribute to economic rebirth of our country. By supporting the creation or deployment of more post-COVID products and services, we are looking at opportunities to provide additional jobs, raise revenue, and attract local and foreign investment. This program intends to provide a fund mechanism that would support our startups, help them focus on providing solutions that are relevant to the needs of our people, and reinvigorate the economy during this post-COVID situation. And the provisions of the for the funding support are aligned with the Innovative Startup Act of 2019 or the RA 11337. Next slide, please. So the Startup Grant Fund program is established to overcome research and development roadblocks by means of prototype improvement, the conduct of feasibility studies, development of product specifications, as well as validate user requirements. This is also to help startups strengthen their intellectual property by means of protection and development of appropriate IP strategies, also to help them establish initial market traction and engage potential users or clients for feedback, validation, to refine their business model based on user or client feedback in order to establish acceptable product offerings or service packages with defined pricing and financial metrics. And lastly, to prepare business continuity plans for operations, scale up, service rollout, expansion of IP protection in other countries as continuous marketing programs. So next slide, please. So the program will support startups who will provide automated, digitalized, and contactless solutions under the following 6 areas of concern. So the first one is the sustainable startup solutions for sustainable industries. So these are technologies intended to fill in the gaps in the value chain of critically important industries to increase productivity, reduce cost, and facilitate production and distribution of goods in the new normal. The other priority area is the supply chain and logistics management. And these are technologies that reduce dependency on physical labor across transportation, logistics, and warehouse platforms for online matching and delivery of goods from source to point of use. The third area is on learning and education. These are technologies in support of remote learning, distance education, and online learning in response to the surge in online teaching in schools and universities. We're also open to accepting innovations related to work from home productivity tools. These are productivity tools that remote workers can use for connection, collaboration, workforce monitoring, time management, among others. The other one is on content and development or talent development, which are technologies to support content and talent development, infusion, enhancement of new digital tools and technologies, marketing, and customer engagement activities. And the last priority area is on digitally empowered tools for public service. And these are digital tools that will enable government agencies to consistently deliver public services at a faster rate, a wider reach, but with enhanced accuracy and transparency. So again, kindly take note of the 6 priority areas that we will prioritize, that we are actually prioritizing for this particular call. So next slide, please. So again, I would like to emphasize that our call for the Startup Grant Fund is intended for the research and development activities of startups. So we don't actually provide funds for capitalization of startups, but again, I'll give more emphasis on the research and development activities of startups. Because before, the PShared or the DOST as a whole only provides grant to researchers in the universities. And in 2017, we finally opened our doors to startups with a startup research grant program where a total of 15 startups received funding. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with the passing of the Innovative Startup Act and the formulation of the guidelines for the DOST grants and aid, which are specific for startups, we believe that we can support more startups in the research and development activities. So to qualify for the funding, your research and development activities should fall under these categories. So ito pa yung categories natin that we can call as research and development. So the first one is yung from proof of concept to prototype, because our minimum requirement is at least a proof of concept. So if you want to convert your proof of concept into prototype, that can qualify as a research and development activity if it includes, if it requires assistance in product improvement, market testing, data gathering, market validation, business modeling, IP protection, and product certification. The other scope is if you already have a prototype and you want to convert it into a market-ready product, that can also fall under this category. And this is to provide support on developing a minimum viable product for startups and startup teams. The output of this assistance is a marketable and validated products or service. The last category is if you already have a product and you want to scale up, this is to support the creation or validation of business model for the commercialization of products or service. This include incubation, mentoring, business support program, capacity building, fabrication support, marketing, and market validation. Support shall also include optimization of processes, acquisition of production capacities, business model validation, research on manufacturability of products, optimization of value chains, mentoring, advisory, legal and expert support, and use of facilities, among others. This shall include support for initial scale-up operations to serve local. So again, yung catch po ng Startup Grant Fund is this is basically intended for research and development activities. So your proposals for funding should be aligned to these categories. Next slide, please. So paano po yung submission natin? So we actually already opened our call last Thursday, I think. Thursday or Friday. I think that's sometime December 2 or December 3. So for when we open the call, I'll share to you later the link for the call for proposals where you can find yung call for proposal document. But for you to participate in our call, the first thing that you need to do is to prepare a capsule proposal. So Capsule proposal lang muna. There's no format. But we would prefer na in Word document siya. So, kindly take note of this content of your capsule proposal. So first, you would need to indicate a title or proposal title of your project. So I've written here an example. So your project title should focus on what's your objective in doing your research and development activity. So just an example, say if you want to enhance or market validate your prototype, so you can indicate their enhancement of prototype and market validation of, say for example, if your technology is an AI-based thermal scanner. So you can you can use that as titles. The next part is on the duration. So the entire duration for the project is just 1 year. So just indicate their 12 months or 1 year. And then kindly also include a description of your startup or your founders. Please provide around 2 to 3 sentences about the background of your startup. What does your startup do? What's your vision? Who are your founders and who are the members of the team? So just a quick description of the startup and the founders. Next slide, please. And then kindly also provide a description of the product or the and its value proposition. So it should include the problem that your product is trying to solve. What are the benefits and the features of your product? So I hope this will be articulated in your capsule proposal, because this is basically where we will evaluate and assess your proposal. We will also need you to provide us a background of the technology development, the evolution of your startup or the technology. So how did it started? How did it start? What was your first prototype? When was the time you started doing your prototype? If there were already alpha or beta testings conducted, kindly indicate that. Or if you were already able to have your first sale, or if you were already able to uh, market or sell your technology, kindly include that in the description in your capsule proposal. The next one is we will also look at the target market and size of your technology or products or service. So kindly include information such as your target market, your demographics, is it local or international, the gender, the specific age. We would also look at if there are market forecasts or growth related to the products or service that you are providing. And then kindly also include a competitive advantage analysis matrix to compare your product versus existing or similar products that are already available in the market. Kindly highlight your competitive advantage as a startup. So next slide, please. And then kindly also include if there's if you're the IP status and protection, if this is applicable. Anyway, if your technology or your product is not yet IP protected, we can actually include that as one of the activities in your research and development proposal. But if you already had the conducted IP search or IP protection activities, kindly include that in your proposal. And then the next one is on the objectives and the scope of your proposed research. So as I mentioned earlier, usually kung ano yung title nyo, yun din yung overall objective ng research and development. So this is basically the main goal of your research and development. Ano ba yung balak nyong gawin? How is it going, are you going to enhance the prototype? Are you going to enhance your prototype? Are you going to market validate your products or services? So kindly include that. And ano yung scope ng proposed research and development. And the next one is yung methodology and expected outputs. This is where you will discuss kung ano yung specific activities nyo going into your research and development activity. So siguro that's where you will discuss kung ano yung mga specific activities for you to be able to conduct your research and developments. And then kindly include also yung measurable outputs. For example, ilang units yung i-develop nyo through this project, ilang clients or ilang customers ang balak nyong i-onboard during the market validation. So measurable outputs, kindly include those. And then the next one, you also need to include a work plan or Gantt chart of activities. You can use a matrix. If this is 1 year, so your work plan should be good for 1 year. So this basically includes all the activities related to your research and development activities. So next slide, please. I hope you took note of this proposal format. And then next one, we'd also ask you to attach a curriculum vitae of the project leader. The project leader, siya yung magle-lead during the implementation of the project. So it's usually the founder or the CEO or the CTO. So any of those positions from the startup. And then lastly, you need to indicate your budgetary requirements for the research and development. So you can just provide us with the list and of the list of the items that you want to be covered for this research and development project. And then later on naman, we can discuss about the line item budget. We can also teach you how to prepare your line item budget. But for the purpose of your capsule proposal, just indicate na lang muna kung ano yung mga budgetary requirements yun and the corresponding amount for that activity. So tapos na tayo doon sa capsule proposal format. So as I mentioned earlier, you need to prepare that. Pwede naman siyang hindi particularly in that order, but at least we would be able to find all those components in your capsule proposal. So as I mentioned earlier, we already opened our call last December 2 pala, and we will ending it on February 1. So you can submit your capsule proposal during the period December 2 to February 1. You can submit that to me. Here's my email, and of course to my chief, Ms. Russell Pili. So kindly screenshot or take a picture of this. Anyway, you can also find this contact information in our call for proposal. So yung pinaka-deadline namin for the submission of the capsule proposal is on February 1, 2021. So you actually have plenty of time to craft your capsule proposals. And of course, in between, you can also ask us questions naman via this contact information that I've provided. Next slide, please. So after you submit your capsule proposal, we will ask you to participate in a proposal write-shop conference which are scheduled on this date. So pwede kayong umattend either on January 15 or kung gusto nyong umulit ulit, pwede ulit kayong umattend on February 2 just to be sure that all questions or clarifications are already considered. So the reason why we are holding the proposal write-shop conference is ang mga startups kasi hindi naman kasi kayo sanay to craft research and development proposal. So parang as an intervention, we're holding this proposal write-shop kasi we wanted to teach you on how. So no worries about crafting your proposal kasi meron naman tayong naka-schedule na proposal write-shop conference. And that's on these dates, January 15, the first one, and on February 2, the second one. So pwede kayong umattend on both. Pwedeng po umattend on the first or on the second. So more announcements to come in the coming days. So, but for now, ito yung dates that we have pinned down for the proposal write-shop conference. And then the reason why we are also holding the proposal write-shop conference, because that's a preparatory for you to be able to prepare the full-blown proposal. So yung kanina kasi capsule proposal pa lang yun eh. And it's just a summary of what you want to do for the research and development. But yung pinaka-requirement talaga namin is the full-blown proposal which you will have to submit through the DOST Project Management Information System or the DPMIS as we call it. starting February 2 until February 26. So after the proposal workshop, you will still have plenty of time also to craft your full-blown proposal, which you have to submit until February 26, 2021. So be mindful of the dates. For sure naman by this time, February 2, since you already attended the proposal write-up conference, at least kahit pa paano medyo naiintindihan nyo na or you're already familiar with crafting the full-blown proposal. So kaya meron kaming proposal write-up. Again, that's to help everyone in crafting their full-blown proposal. So yeah, next slide please. So just a quick recap of the dates to remember. So yung submission of capsule proposal natin is already open. So that will end until February 1, 2020. And then yung proposal conference write-up natin, we have two. That's on January 15, 2021. And the other one is on February 2, 2021. So I hope you'll be able to participate. Parang wala na excuse not to participate kasi nakadalawa na nga yan eh. And siguro by that time also we will record also the write-up just for those who are not able to attend, just in case may mga conflict in the schedule. And then lastly, yung submission ng full-blown proposals natin, that's after the proposal write-up conference. So hopefully that time, you're already able to craft your full-blown proposals. So yung pinaka-deadline natin is yung February 26, 2021. So after everyone has submitted their full-blown proposals, that's where we actually start na yung evaluation ng mga proposals. So the evaluation will really based on the merits of your proposal. So magkakaroon din tayo ng different levels of evaluation. I think that will also be discussed later in the line-to-line workshop on the guidelines after this. So next slide. So I think that's it for the call for proposals. So we hope you're able to clearly understood yung ano yung details and ano yung mga kailangang requirements for you to be able to submit your proposals. I think I can answer some questions. You can actually ask questions through our Q&A box. So I think I have 3 questions. So yung unang question from Sir Ray.
Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Siguro I can briefly...
We have a question from Sir Ray.
Yeah, I can ako na lang diretso ko na lang yung mga questions from the Q&A box. So I can answer them live. So is there a working document for the template of the proposal? So wala naman, sir. So as I mentioned earlier, we would prefer actually a Word file na editable when you submit it to us. Do not submit to us in PDF. Kasi para mas madali also for us to evaluate kasi we will be coming up with rubrics para madali din i-copy-paste yung mga information. We'll be coming up a database kasi of all the proposals. So walang for the capsule proposal, wala munang format. Basta you include all those components that I've discussed earlier, mamula sa project title hanggang sa line item budget. So andun naman siya. What is the minimum and maximum budget for a 1-year grant? So as indicated doon sa call for proposals namin, a startup can avail up to a maximum of 5 million pesos grant. So, pero hindi naman ibig sabihin nun na lahat kayo ay 5 million. So, yun na yung pinaka-cap namin. But again, we would evaluate naman your proposals. If we think na your budget is too much for your specific activity, then most likely baka mabawasan pa yon. So I hope na yung when you submit to us your proposed budget, that corresponds really to your requirement. Hindi naman porque sinabi ng 5 million, ito todo din natin ng 5 million. So as much as possible, let's also reflect yung kung ano talaga yung requirement natin. Anyway, we will also help you naman during the proposal write-up. And then, are you gonna send us calendar invites for those dates? Of course, we will be sharing to you yung ano namin, yung event details. We will send you Once you submit to us your capsule proposal, we will send each of you your email in your emails yung information related to the proposal write-up on January and February. Sino po ba pwede makasali? So mamaya we will discuss each kung sino yung pwedeng mag-submit ng proposal. Pwede po ba senior high? Mamaya, later, that will be discussed during the line-to-line startup guidelines. We submitted a proposal last year. We did not get any reply. How will we know if our proposal was received? I'm not sure if kung anong proposal yung sinend niyo, since if it's startup, kasi hindi kami nag-open ng proposal last year for startup eh. We just had for the COVID proposals. But if it's a research and development proposal, most likely sa ibang unit namin yon. If you send us your capsule proposal, we will of course acknowledge your submission. So if you send it through email, we will of course answer it via email. So may ready na kami na database. We actually had a game plan in terms of how we'll be able to monitor the proposal submissions, even the queries from the startups. Kasi since we opened it last week, we're already getting a lot of queries. So we're actually managing them also. And then will it affect our proposal if there are some requirements that are not met? Like as we are SEC registered BIR, but I'm using my personal account to receive payments from clients. Will this be a problem? Later, sir. This will be discussed during the line-to-line review of the guidelines. Can we also visit your office for consultations? Medyo tayo yan, sir. Hindi tayo for as much as possible, we want to do everything virtually kasi bawal pa sa amin to accept external or guest considering also the restrictions. So where is the ease of business? Later pa, i-discuss during the line-to-line review. What can prevent others from copying our ideas? What can prevent others from copying our ideas? So as far as yung mga evaluators natin, we will be asking them to sign a non-disclosure agreement para protected yung ideas nyo. And if you already had some IP protection activities already conducted, that can already also help you in terms of protecting your ideas. So as far as kami naman, we don't disclose anything on public. So everything that you submit will be confidential just for us. And again, all the evaluators will be signing a non-disclosure agreement. So I guess later pag may questions pa kayo, just keep them coming. We can answer them one by one, and can answer them one by one either through the Q&A box or can answer them live. All right, so maybe we can now proceed to the line per line review of the guidelines. So I hope this will provide you this will make you understand clearly kung ano yung guidelines natin for the Startup Grant Fund, because this is for DOST.
So thank you for that, Sir Edward. That was really informative. Surely our participants here would take note on all those information, and startups here would definitely grab this great opportunity. So for the next part of the session, let me give the virtual floor to Ms. Russell Pili to discuss to us the consultation mechanics or the line-to-line review of the startup guidelines.
Sige, so since Ms. Russell is not yet here kasi something just came out, she needs to present something to the management. So I'll start na lang muna. I'll go over line to line. All right, so just keep your questions coming. You can use again the Q&A box for you to ask questions. So, yung title ng guidelines natin, this is called the Guidelines for the Grants in Aid Program for the DOST Startup Grant Fund. So, uh, so as I mentioned earlier, dati kasi ang DOST, we only provide support for research and development ng mga researchers in the universities, and we don't fund startups before. And with the passage of the Republic Act 1133-7, so the DOST, along with the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Information and Communications Technology, uh, we call ourselves as the host agencies. We were tasked to provide programs, benefits, and incentives for startups as promulgated in the Republic Act 1133-7, which is the Innovative Startup Act. So, paakyat na lang po. So, the Innovative Startup Act has several provisions, and among which is the Startup Grant Fund, which is stipulated under Section 4, which states that the Act creates a Philippine Startup Development Program, which shall be composed of programs, benefits, and incentives for startups and startup enablers promulgated through the respective mandates of the national government agencies. So as I mentioned earlier, that's DOST, DTI, and DICT. So these guidelines are being issued for the establishment of the Startup Grant Fund, SGF, to provide for its implementing guidelines a separate grants and aid program for DOST. So meron kaming separate grants and aid program. We call it GIA program for DOST. So Section 5 identifies the following objectives to be achieved by the Philippine Startup Development Program. So yung pinakauna dyan is the support for research and development or R&D of startups and startup enablers in the Philippines. So I will not go through the other objectives, but basically ang pinaka-align kasi doon sa Startup Grant Fund is the objective 2.1, which is support for the research and development R&D of startups. So, pa-up na lang po. So in Section 7, the Act authorizes the host agencies to provide benefits and incentives to startups and or startup enablers who have passed their selection and application process. So including grants and aid for research, development, training, and expansion projects. So I would like to emphasize na hindi siya automatic na once you submitted your proposal, automatic na magkakaroon na kayo ng funding. So it's still subject to selection, it's still subject to evaluation. So that's why yung nakalagay dyan in line 3, section 7, who have passed their selection and application process. So kaya meron tayong set of requirements and criteria in the selection of those who will be provided the Startup Grant Fund. And then next, Section 11 provides for the creation of Startup Grant Fund under DOST, DTI, and DICT to provide initial and supplemental GIA for startups and startup enablers that have passed its selection and application process. So nakalagay dyan, SGF for DOST, DTI, and DICT. So ibig po sabihin, si DTI and DICT, we also have their own Startup Grant Fund. So itong ginagawa namin ngayon na public consultation, this is specifically for DOST. So you may come across also yung Startup Grant Fund program ng DTI and DICT. I think they're also currently crafting their own guidelines now. So I hope you watch out for it kasi later on, they will also be providing their own public consultation. And they will also have their own Startup Grant Fund. So again, for this purpose, itong ginagawa natin ngayon na public consultation, this is specifically for the Startup Grant Fund program of the DOST. So, up po. So the DOST Startup Grant Fund program is intended to provide grants and aid for startups and startup enablers that have passed the DOST selection and application process. So the DOST shall enhance its engagement with startups by providing R&D support for the technology needs. So siguro before I go to the other portions, let me just open the Q&A box. Baka kasi may mga questions dito related to the first portion. So we already have clients waiting for our product. Does this put us ahead? Complete documents and 3 patent for our technology with company bank. Well, at least you're already if you're already able to accomplish those, I would say na kahit papano you're already able to comply with the requirements, but that doesn't mean na you're already ahead of everyone. I think we will still base on the merits of your proposal kasi this is a research and development grant fund. So yung titingnan namin other than the requirements, other than the achievement ng startup, we will also look at the merits or technical merits of your R&D proposal. So yung basis talaga namin is your research and development proposal. So is there a follow-up grant just in case 5 million is not enough? I think that will be covered na by the DTI and DICT. Kasi kung si DOST kasi is more on the development, product development side. On the expansion later on, pag may maraming fund, that will be covered later by the DTI. So they are also doing a grant fund program for that. Yes, we will send you a copy of the criteria for selection. Is it required to be a corporation or sole owner? Yung minimum requirement namin is a DTI or an SEC registration. So much better na you register sa SEC din. Sige, I'll proceed na with the next portion of before I answer the other questions. So this guideline provides the eligibility requirements for startups and startup enablers to avail of the funding of the DOST SGF. So itong guidelines na ito, kaya why we came up with this one is to provide kung ano yung mga requirements for the startups and the startup enablers for you to be able to avail of the DOST Startup Grant Fund. So the DOST JA program for the Startup Grant Fund covers grant application, approval, grant administration, monitoring, and reporting of programs and projects funded under this program. So, pababa na lang po. So siguro hindi ko na i-go through itong definition of terms. Anyway, we will be sending you a copy of this. Sige, kasi medyo madami yung definition of terms eh. And if we will have to go through each, baka abutin tayo ng alas 4. So the definition of terms are basically stated in this guidelines also to guide everyone in terms of kung ano yung correct definition ng mga terms that are stipulated in these guidelines. So paakyat po. So the GIA guidelines for the DOST Startup Grant Fund shall also provide fund assistance to startup enablers in addressing any or a combination of the following concerns subject to the concerned DOST agency's assessment of proponent and or grantee. So yung Startup Grant Fund natin does not only cater to startups, but this also caters to startup enablers. So sino-sino yung mga startup enablers? Examples of startup enablers are the technology business incubators, the academe, accelerators. So sila yung mga startup organizations also, startup groups, they are also considered as startup enablers. So they can actually avail of the startup grant fund, startup grant funding. So pababa. So ito po yung objective ng Startup Grant Fund program natin. The first one is to support learning and exposure of startups and startups enablers in national and international conferences and competitions held in the Philippines and in other countries. The second one is to engage and support startup enablers to assist in the innovation activities of startups and to facilitate collaboration and partnerships among key players in the startup ecosystem to promote innovation and innovation activities. And of course, to develop and amend policies and regulations. So ito po yung benefits these are the benefits to startups and startup enablers availing of the DOST Startup Grant Fund program. So kanina, yung present ko kanina, that's just one of the benefits for the Startup Grant Fund. That's specific for the startup research and development funding. But there are also other benefits that the startups and startup enablers can avail through the DOST Startup Grant Fund. So the first one is the access to the DOST Council's grants and aid program. So startups shall have access to funds necessary for them to create, validate, and scale their innovation. Likewise, startup enablers shall have access to funds necessary to support, educate, and engage very early stage startups and startup teams. So yun yung pinagkaiba ng support that we provide for the startups and the startup enablers. So yung sa startups, more on the research and development side for them to be able to create, validate, and scale their innovations. And then yung sa startup enablers naman, it's basically a funding mechanism for them to support, educate, and engage very early stage startups and startup teams. So yung mga startup enablers natin, you can also craft proposals that are geared towards these objectives or these activities. So I hope you take note of that. The second one is the access to follow-up financial assistance for scale-up and expansion offered by other DOST offices and agencies. So specifically for startups to have the opportunity of accessing other fund mechanisms within the DOST system upon endorsement by the concerned DOST agency head. So actually, the DOST Startup Grant Fund program is just one of the funding mechanisms that a startup can avail. But that doesn't end there. Kasi after you already availed of the Startup Grant Fund, there are also other funding mechanisms that the DOST is also providing to, say, startups or SMEs. So you can actually also avail of those funding opportunities. So actually, that answers also yung question kanina na if ever hindi enough yung 5 million, meron bang funding later or after? Yes, meron tayong mga other funding mechanisms within the DOST system. So, but hindi lang siya research and development activities din. The third one is the access to science and technology network of the DOST. So, the DOST kasi has established its pool of mentors and technical experts. Technical expertise available from the pool of researchers and scientists from the Science and Technology Network. So if you would need technical experts to help you in terms yung sa pag-craft sa pag-develop or enhance ng technology nyo, you can actually leverage on that. So meron tayong technical expertise that we can engage. That can actually be included also in the scope of the funding. So yung payment natin for the technical expert, say for example, if you need an machine learning expert, if you need a biotechnology or nanotechnology expert, we can engage or we can endorse or we can introduce you to those experts who can help you in your product or technology development. Access to DOST testing laboratories and research facilities. So the DOST also has several testing and laboratory facilities that you can also use. Say for example, kung meron kayong, if your product is on electronics, we have the Electronics Processing Development Center, which is the EPDC. You can use that to test your products or your electronic products, and we have different laboratories that you can access. So paakyat po muna, huwag po munang baba. So that's the beauty about being able to access these funds or this grant, kasi you're also able to access the DOST laboratories and research centers that you need for you to be able to develop or create or enhance your technologies. And the next, access to the DOST Technology Business Incubator Network. So the startup or startup enabler shall also be provided access to the services of the TBI network in selected areas. These services include access to mentors, the network of companies under the TBI, the pool of experts and consultants. So currently, the DOST has 48 technology business incubators all over the country. So meron kaming 48 technology business incubators which are hosted in the universities, and you can go to those TBIs for you to be able to access their services. So yung mga services that the TBIs provide, that includes yung mga mentoring natin, mentoring and coaching sessions. They also provide IP management services, legal services that you can also avail. So actually, we highly encourage startups who would apply for this program to be affiliated with a TBI. Kasi that would give you an advantage. So madali naman kasi we have 48 technology business incubators already all over the country. So you can access those TBIs. Si QBO, which is our innovation hub, you can actually sign up for them. That can already suffice. So pag mag-sign up kayo kay QBO, that will already count as an affiliation to a DOST funded TBI. So next, ayan, I think I was already able to cover this earlier. So hindi ko na yun i-discuss. So same lang naman. So itong number 4 lang. So kanina I discussed about kung ano yung scope ng research and development activities that would qualify for the Startup Grant Fund. Ikaw na? Sige. So andito na si Ma'am Russell. Siya talaga yung speaker natin. So I will turn over the virtual floor to Ma'am Ras, who will continue the discussion. So Ma'am Ras, kanina pala, from the start until this portion, meron akong ibang questions that I answered live. So maybe you can just use the chat box if in case you want to check on questions. Yeah. So I now turn over to Ma'am Russell Pilis, just beside me. She'll be using my laptop.
Good morning.
Yep.
Wait lang
Ano? Okay naman. Naka-ano na siya. Naka-on na.
Wala ako dun.
Pati daw siya nakikita sa video.
Sorry. Anyway, so let me continue. Sorry, I have another presentation earlier. So, yeah. So now we're on the different types of grants or different types of programs. Tama ba?
Yes.
Okay. That startups and startup enablers can avail of in the fund, and what what we can actually provide financial assistance for. So yung mga naka-red, yun yung na-discuss ni Edward earlier. But let me continue with number 4. The grant also provides startups and startup enablers to participate in national and international conferences. But the call earlier does not include this for now because we're still working on the guidelines for the international conferences and competitions with the DTI. So siguro by next year, we'll be able to provide you, we'll open this to the startups. And then we're also looking at startups, startup enablers specifically, for them to help us will expose, teach, educate our young startups. So we'll be able to cover actually the resources and means for the startup enablers to engage the startups. But this is not yet part of the call. We're still going to discuss how we're going to deliver this and how we're going to engage also the startup enablers so that we can do programs together. Okay. Um, a foreign entity, well, this is part of the guidelines, a foreign startup enabler or startup organization may also apply as a collaborator or partner, but we cannot fund them directly. They have to have a local counterpart company that we can transfer the funds to or provide support. So hindi pwedeng foreign ang registration. Somebody has to have a local registration for them to avail of the grants. Okay. The DOST and its attached agencies shall develop and promulgate separate guidelines on the specific program. So aside from these guidelines that you are seeing, um, we will also issue out our own, depending on the program that we are opening up, like yung program, the call for the jump starting for the for the new normal. So we'll be issuing criteria, evaluation processes, and yeah, additional guidelines for us to select and screen and provide support to startups. Okay, so next slide, please. Eligibility. I think some of these are already covered by Edward, but just to inform all of you are interested to apply for a DOST grant. So the general requirements, top of mind requirements for this are it should be aligned with our harmonized national R&D agenda. So, ang ibig lang sabihin nito ay it should be aligned with our priorities. If your startup is not within our priorities, then we may not be able to fund them. So it doesn't mean na pag na-disapprove kayo ay hindi maganda yung proposal or your startup is not good. It's just that probably the first reason is that it's not within our priorities. The second general requirement is no duplication with ongoing programs and projects. So hindi pwedeng lahat na lang ay, well, using the same technologies. Common yan sa ating mga startup communities, di ba? But during the evaluation process, we will determine how duplication will be tackled. Okay. And the third requirement is proponents or startups are allowed only one project grant at a time. So hindi pwedeng dalawang project. Alam mo, may project ka na, tapos mag-submit ka pa ulit. And hindi pwedeng ganon. Or mag-submit ka sa Picard, mag-submit ka sa Picard. So hindi rin pwedeng ganon. So you are allowed only one project grant at a time. Okay. Um, So and pwede naman kayo as a follow-up. Once the project is completed, then we may decide to provide follow-up funding to the same startup after the first grant. Or we can endorse you to other DOST programs. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this has been tackled by Edward, so I'm not going to discuss it again. Just make sure that you have all the requirements for you to avail of the grant. Next slide, please. Siguro 2 more pages, then I'll entertain questions. Okay. And then, yes, so I think Edward also has explained this, tama ba? Startups that can avail of the DOST grant should have a minimum of 1 year. 1 year from the date of registration, 1 year from the submission of the proposal to the date of registration. The reason for this is that we want also startups that are serious. We want also startups that are eligible to receive funding. We want also startups that has enough experience on the technology that they are proposing. So that's the reason for that. And a maximum of 3 years. If you're more than 3 years, you may not be qualified for the grant, except if there are meritorious cases, then we have to elevate that to the DOST secretary for his consideration and approval. But for the screening, we will use this criterion. 3 years because if you're more than 3 years, then you may be mature enough avail of or to attract investors already. So iwan na natin yung government grant to those that are really needing the help. So, okay. Eligibility to the GIA program of the DOST shall be determined by the agencies providing the grant. And for the call kanina, it's Fishered. Then qualifications and requirements for startup enablers naman. So even though we don't have a program yet or a call for proposals yet for startup enablers, we do have a set of requirements for them. So una na dyan, kailangan, again, registered. Next slide, please. Because you cannot transfer funds pag wala kang legal personality. That's the main reason. So we also require copies of articles of incorporation. And for startup enablers, the minimum requirement actually is 3 years because we need your financial reports for the past 3 years before the date of the project implementation. So pag nagsubmit ka ng proposal na approve na, yung start ng project dapat 3 years na yung registration mo. For less than 3 years naman, there may be hope, but we also need your financial reports and proof of previous implementation of similar projects. It's easier, relatively easier to fund startups because, well, you're talking about technologies, but with startup enablers kasi, papasok siya doon sa dimension ng parang NGOs and then government is very careful in dealing with NGOs. That's why our requirements are strict actually for startup enablers. So I hope you understand. Okay, so other qualifications and requirements. Next. Okay. So there. So probably na-explain na rin to ni Edward. So additional requirements and qualifications. Early stage prototype or proof of concept for the product or service. Dapat meron na. Pag ideas kasi, mahirap siyang i-evaluate actually and mahirap i-determine yung success. And preference, okay, so we have preference to startups incubated in the TBIs of the DOST, but this does not preclude or exclude startups that are not within our network. So pwede pa rin kayo mag-apply, pwede pa rin kayo mag-avail of the grant even though you're not within the TBI network. So may question ba regarding doon? So yeah, I'll explain later kung bakit may preference kami to those that are incubated in the TBIs. For those not incubated in the TBIs, we still would want to encourage you to at least be a member of one of our TBIs. So that would make it easier for us. And yeah, for startups that are not within our TBIs, we'll be looking for more proofs actually that you have at least 6 months to 1 year demonstrated capability on the proposed innovation. So if you are proposing an R&D that requires machine learning, then we would look at your track record in terms of that field. Hindi pwedeng bukas mag-machine learning ako and then mag-propose ako ng proposal. So medyo, yeah, you have to have a demonstrated capability in that field. Next page, please. Next section. Okay. And another requirement, especially for startup enablers, medyo careful nga kami with startup enablers because of the NGO thing. So all startups actually and all startup enablers should be duly registered at the Startup PH website. So this will be set up by the DICT. But since wala pa yun, we can actually engage with startups now because we know how to handle them. But later na lang ang startup enablers pag meron ng Startup PH website. And then we can also specify additional requirements and criteria for evaluation and qualifications for startup enablers that are not specifically mentioned in these guidelines. Next section, please. Okay, so if you submit a proposal That is, of course, dapat research and development because DOST is science and technology. So this is how we're going to evaluate your proposal, your R&D. So we're evaluating in terms of technical viability. It should be sound, it should be workable, and maturity of the technology, of course. And we'll be looking for advanced features of the technology, what you will do in the research, how it will advance further your tech. And also, since we're using government grants, we're very particular now for social and environmental impacts. This is actually a compromise because we cannot fund your business. That's the most straightforward fact that I can um, advise. But we're funding startups because your technology can help society. So ano yun? So we're looking for social metrics like employment generation, how it will help society, how will your startup benefit our country. So also, if there are long-term hazards or consequences for environment as well as in health and safety. So yung mga yon, we look out for also that aspect. Commercial viability, of course, we need you to be competitive in the market. So we're looking at if the tech that you have proposed to us will be viable as well. It will be competitive. And the next one is not part of our R&D criteria. Yung management capability. From our experience with our first cohort, yung management talaga is a factor for success. We have to have confidence in the team that you can complete at least the project, that the project that you proposed would be beneficial to your startups. And that would redound to your capability as a manager also of the startups. And probably you have read about the fund, about returning the fund in case that you have uh, well, kung saan man kayo na technical. But I will explain that later, so don't worry. Manageable time frame. We only have 1 year for the grant that was called before, but for other programs, we may have a different time frame. But we're also very strict um, with our time frame because may processes in using government grants, and we cannot get away from that. So we want the startups to be able to scope appropriately for the activities that they will put in the proposal para hindi tayo ma-technical. Okay. So next slide please. Okay, so ito na cover na nito ni Edward. So just try to, well, this is part of the pitch deck naman. So I think carry nyo na to. So next slide please. Okay, line item budget. The way you request for grants from the DOST is that you prepare line item budgets. But don't worry about how to prepare a line item budget. In your concept proposals, just put in the resources that you need. Tutulungan na lang namin kayong mag-come up with a line item budget. Or you can also seek advice from your TBI managers because they know how to prepare one. The line item budget is the grant or the breakdown of the grant that we will be giving to the startup. So, nandyan yung direct costs na term, and it's on the the part of the grants that will be used for the research activity. So, nandiyan ang personal services. You can hire people specifically for the project. You can charge maintenance and operating expenses and even equipment so that you can complete the research. So, tao, operating expenses, and equipment. Yun yung you can charge to the grant. So, let me just break down a little uh, but before I break down the LID, kasi medyo mahaba-haba to, maybe I can answer some of the questions already in the Q&A. Okay. Sige. Wala bang MC?
Yeah, maybe.
Nakalimutan
So,
ako.
hi, Miss Russell.
Yeah.
So we have a few
Sorry.
questions here in the Q&A box. So first, we already have clients waiting for our product. Does this put us ahead? Complete documents and 3 patent for our technology with company bank account.
Hmm. So you already have clients. Well, that's actually it's either a boost or a bane. It depends on the evaluation, and also it depends on the amount of proposals that we receive. So we're only going to fund 15 startups for next year. So you will have to compete with the grant. So if you have clients already, then that indicates that you have market traction. But we'll also look at if you still need a government grant, and if you can already if you're already attractive to an investor, then maybe you're not our market. So how do we know if you're qualified? Just submit a capsule, a concept proposal, and either way we will evaluate your proposal, then we'll let you know. Try na lang. That's the best advice that I can give. Next question, please.
So yes, next question is, will it undergo on the usual government procurement, bidding and awarding?
Okay. Are you asking about the grants, bidding and awarding ba? Is that what you mean?
Yes, I guess from this is a question from Sir J. Gahudo. Um,
Okay. So this is not bidding. So um, we're not actually putting out a material or a terms of reference na ganito yung gusto kong gawin nyo and mag-bid kayo. No, it doesn't work that way. We want you to submit a proposal that contains a research activity that you need so that you can be competitive. Ito yung requirement nyo. I am an AI company, but I need to research on a system that can do this because in the future, my market would be this. So yung research na yon, that we can fund. And in availing of the grant, then the process is, I will explain that later on. The process is you submit a proposal, we evaluate the proposal, and if it is approved by several levels, then we will proceed to releasing the grant to the startup. So hindi siya bidding.
oh, okay. So I hope we answered your question, Sir J. So next question is, do you take command on some of the processes during the R&D of our project?
Command.
Yeah, yes, command.
Okay. So let me put it this way. This is your product. This is your startup. And um, it's like you're asking for help so that you can develop your technology, you develop your product or service. So we're providing you that help. So we actually, since it's people's money, um, we would actually monitor how you're using the grants. But based on the technical or the research that you are doing, we will let you do what you need to do because we siguro naman pag na-approve kayo in the process, then we'll have confidence in you that you can do that research. But we will monitor your activities, of course. So walang command na I want to look at it as a partnership instead.
Right. So, okay. Next question is, can we have a list on what analysis are our DOST laboratories?
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So we're doing a special lane for startups for for the testing services of the DOST. I'm not sure if it's already signed. So just remind me. We'll announce it later on.
So, okay. Another question is, what is your involvement in our project when we are given the grant?
Okay. Our involvement is that since we're the funding agency, meron yata ditong in the guidelines the responsibilities of the funding agency and the monitoring agency. But rest assured that it's a partnership, and uh, we're confident enough. If we approved you, if we selected you, we're confident enough that you can do the research, but we'll also monitor use the how you're using the fund in doing that research, because us as funding agency, we're accountable to the people's money. So yun lang naman, kailangan namin bantayan. Pag sinabi mo ang kailangan mong materyales for the device, we have to make sure that ang binili mo lang ay materyales for the device. Gusto ko rin mag-retire. Yan. Peacefully. So, okay.
Yes, thank you for that, Miss Russell. So another question. So if the grant is approved, when it will be released?
Okay. So, subject to availability of funds. But in our experience, well, mabilis na evaluation ngayon. So, we have a timeline presented by Edward. And hopefully, if the fund is available, then we can release it to you within a month after approval.
So why is that it should be should the startup be DTI registered?
Okay. I think I mentioned this earlier because you are receiving a large amount of money. So that large amount of money should be managed by a legal entity. So paano kayo makaka-issue ng receipts to us if you do not have any registration? And of course, we also have to have confidence in you in doing availing of the grants. So the registration is one requirement that actually signals that you are capable enough to do or manage the grants. A legal
So
yeah legal personality to receive the grant. That's the
oh
reason.
okay. Another question is the provincial government can apply as a startup enabler?
Provincial government. Let's see, because we haven't issued a call for startup enablers, but based on uh, pag government yata hindi. Let me check on the requirements again. Government, provincial government
Enablers,
as an enabler.
host sila eh, not an enabler.
Yeah, so
They're considered as host agencies.
so pag government hindi, so it should be private. Kasi pag government, well, sabi ni Edward, they are considered as host agencies under the Innovative Startup Act. So hindi.
Oh, okay, got it, Miss Russell. So another question, is it possible to submit one project proposal with multiple products?
One project proposal. If the question is if it's possible, but you know the question actually, the answer actually is that will it be approved, or will it be viable enough for a grant? So looking at the criteria for evaluation, if you have many products in the proposal, then focus will suffer and the activities will be blown up. So I'm not sure if well, we'll still look at it during the evaluation, but what I would advise is that you focus your research on a platform technology, so that after your research you can develop more products and services out of the platform.
Yes, so okay, we have few more questions. So will it affect our proposal if our startup is using our founder's personal account to receive payments from client? since we when we started the company, we really had no ideas. So some of the stuff we just decided doing this out of
Hmm.
convenience then.
Okay. Yeah. Since the personal account is used to receive income and we're not actually monitoring income of the startup, so probably, yeah, probably pwede. But what we will be monitoring closely would be saang account mo ilalagay yung grant. It should be in the startup account. Later on, meron siya dito. So, I'll cover that also.
Okay. So another question, we already have a working prototype now. We have been developing the product for 1 year now, but we haven't been registered or startup as a business yet. We are still processing it through the SEC. So do we still qualify?
Um, no. Kasi the requirement is a minimum of 1 year from 1 year from the date that you submitted a proposal to your date of registration. So for now, for the call right now, you may not be qualified, pero kung pag pinort out mo yung registration mo, baka sa next cycle, ma-qualify ka na.
Okay. So
Yeah. I can
okay.
answer more questions later. Okay lang ba?
Sure,
I
ma'am.
can
Sure, Miss
proceed.
Russell. Okay.
Thank you. Catherine ba? Okay. Edward, paano tanggalin ito? There. Thank you. So, let me proceed to the financials. So, ano-ano yung pwedeng i-charge sa grant? So, sinabi ko na kanina, salaries, operating expenses, and equipment. So, ano-ano yon? So, uh, next section, please. Yeah, personal services. So, personal services are salaries and wages, honoraria, and consultants fees, specialist fees, for those that will be involved in the project. So, hindi to sweldo ng lahat ng tao mo to start up. So, we will allow you to hire people that nung wala ka pa because you need those skills so that you can do the research. You can also charge the salaries of people that you have if wala silang salaries right now. So, you can charge people there for kung ano yung term ng project, like if it's 1 year. And if you need consultants and they're expensive, then you can pay also the consultants fees through the grant. Okay. So next section, please. We'll also be explaining this in the startup proposal conference. So if you missed it or kung hindi masyadong clear, we'll explain it again. So don't worry. Operating expenses. So hindi to yung operation ng startups nyo. These are operating expenses so that you can do the research based on the project. So, dun lang tayo sa kung ano yung nilagay mo sa project. So, if the project requires you to travel because meron kang, you need to reach out to people, you need to validate your market, you need to deliver these goods, so you need traveling, so you can charge that to the project. So, pwede siyang local, pwede siyang abroad. It's just that pag abroad, kailangan nyo magpaalam sa funding agency because you'll be using the grant, a government grant. Okay, so magpaalam means you have to request officially, then we will issue an express approval before you can go, before you can even book. So bawal po yung nandun ka na saka ka mag-request. So ang ending nun, it's disallowance. Sagot mo yung travel mo. Okay, so just be mindful of those, and yes, so pwede kang mag-rent, hindi, rent pala yon. So pwede kang traveling, the travel expense for ships, airlines, so pwedeng bus, pwede rin tolls, so yeah, parking fees, and other reasonable expenses. Basta you use it for the conduct of the research, ha? And yan, explain ko na yung foreign travel has to have an express approval from the funding agency. Next section, please. Communication expense. So you can also charge communication expense, yung mga cell cards, postage, delivery charges, communication services, yung internet. So pwede yang i-charge just for the period of the project. Okay. Repair and maintenance of facilities. I think may question ito late kanina. So you can also charge repair of equipment that you already have. So meron kang 3D printer. So instead of bibili ka ng bago, pa-repair mo na lang kung okay pa yon. So you can charge it to the project. Kung meron kang machinery, so for other startups, meron siyang mga grinders, yung mga ganon. You can either buy a new one or you can either repair your existing. Yeah. So, hindi kami nag-aalaw ng building, but repair of the building is allowed. So, pwede mong ayusin para lang mag-comply ka with good manufacturing practices. So, that can be allowed, especially if it's a nanotech or a biotech startup. So, very particular sila on the facilities. Okay, so that can be charged to the project. Transportation and deliveries, so you can charge it also to the grant. So nandiyan naman ang details, I don't have to go through it. Supplies and materials, of course, you can charge it to the grant, including raw materials, including agricultural supplies, including, may zoological supplies pa nga eh. So it depends on the startups. Oil, lubricants, even instructional materials are allowed as supplies. So, Okay, utilities, we can also pay for some of the cost for water, electricity if you need it, if it's very substantial in the conduct of research. Pero kung kuryente mo lang at your normal operations, hindi naman na. So, yeah, sige, i-go through ko lang and then, sige. Training expense, we can also pay for your training expense for conferences, especially for startups if merong bayad, di ba? Sayang naman. Exhibits and competition fees and other expenses. So pwede naman. You can also charge it to the project. But there are limitations, of course, when it's a foreign conference. So you have to have an express approval from the funding agency. So printing and binding, so kailangan mo mag-bind, kailangan mo ng documents, catalog, so that you can charge it to the project. Rent expense, yeah, if you want to rent an equipment rather than buy it, or rent some vehicles because meron kang survey na gagawin, then you can charge it to the grant. Rent for facilities, if well, case to case, probably the best answer. So we'll look at where you'll spend the expense, that expense. So in the proposal, representation expense. If you have meetings with clients, meetings with validators, meetings with investors, pwede mo silang pakainin. So you have conferences, workshops as part of your research, then yeah, pwede ka mag-charge ng food. Subscription expense for magazines, for reading materials, and software. So you can charge subscription, especially for IT-based research, IT-based startups. Survey expense, I don't know if any of you would have a need for it, pero if you have surveys needed, so you can charge it to the project. Professional services, as defined in the government accounting manual, yeah, you can pay for ito yung consultants then you can also pay for using professional services. You can pay for lawyers' fees. You can pay for, especially for filing intellectual property, even abroad. So, pwede kang magbayad ng lawyer, IP lawyer, so they can help you. Other consultants, IT, data science consultants, so you can charge it all here. So, professional services. And even some of your mentors, if you want your mentors to be incentivized also. Other maintenance and operating expenses, those that do not fall in any of the accounts, you can also also put it there. My word of advice for people who are new to this system, in the concept proposal that you will be submitting, ilagay mo lang doon kung ano yung kailangan mo, and then we will advise you appropriately kung saan siya magfo-fall. We also do that. That's why we have the proposal conference. So we'll teach you how to prepare a line item budget. So don't you worry. Just put in there kung ano yung kailangan nyo. You just have to be very open with us because we're here naman to help you. Our assistance includes, itatawid natin yung practices that you have to a government practice. So medyo iba siya. So you have to trust us with also your proposals. Capital outlay, there's a separate section for equipment. So if you need a server, a laptop, or other equipment, then you can also charge it to the project, subject to the evaluation, of course, of the funding agency and the monitoring agency. Okay, I'll discuss more of it later on. Indirect costs, this does not concern the startups. It's between us, and government agencies. So if I ask another government agency to monitor you, then I will have to pay for their monitoring costs. So yun lang ibig sabihin ng indirect costs. Okay, so next section, please. Okay, counterpart. Yeah, please show the counterpart, please. So in every grant requests that you will make, kailangan may counterpart ang startups. So we actually require that you have to have a 20% counterpart of the total project cost. So start computing ano yung 20% for the grant that you need. If you need a grant of 5 million, ano yung 20% nun? So you have to provide for that. If your grant request is 1 million, ano yung 20% nun? So you have to provide for that. That's a rule that we cannot actually take away because it shows us also your buy-in as a startup, that you believe that by sharing the costs together in this research, then merong interest, or I mean a commitment on your part that this will work because we have a counterpart as well. So yun yung ibig sabihin niyan. That's why we are very strict with the counterpart. Counterpart naman doesn't mean that it's in cash. So pwede siyang in kind. Yung in kind kasi malawak ang ibig sabihin nun. But you just let us know so that we can help you if it will qualify as a counterpart. One example that I can give you is that may mga tao kayo that has this expertise within the startup, but their salaries are not charged to the grant. So yung day-to-day contribution niya to the project can be a counterpart as well. So we monetize his time. So kung ilan sila involved in the research, but the salaries are not charged to the grants, so we monetize their time. So if their running rate is around 50,000 per month, then kung ilang months sila, ilang tao, then that can be computed as your counterpart. So hindi naman siya maglalabas ka talaga ng cash. So it's just that we have to think of ways on how to put up this counterpart. Counterpart also means that may examples ba dyan? Pwedeng cash, if we have cash. Pwedeng labor cost, yun in-explain ko, the expertise and their time, we monetize. Pwedeng the project site itself, the facilities that you have, which you will be using in the research, that can be monetized as a counterpart. Monetize meaning, i-compute lang natin yung value that you're putting in the research project, or equipment that you already have that can be computed as a counterpart as well. So you let us know. Some of you are new in computing for this, but you let us know kung ano yung pwede nating i-counterpart. Then we can help you with your line item budget, because this is part of the line item budget. Okay, so somebody's raising his hand. Miss Catherine, do I proceed?
Oh, yeah, sure, Miss Russell, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next section please. Para matapos tayo, mahaba din to ha. Uh, roles and obligations of the startup or the startup enabler as the one who is proposing for a grant. So of course you have a role. Aside from submitting a proposal, so the startup, which is the proponent, um, has the primary responsibility on the general supervision of all project activities. All project activities that are written in the proposal. So tandaan niyo yun, written in the proposal. And approved by the funding agencies, of course. Approved objectives, targets, and work plan. So there. The proponent actually has to nominate a project leader, which is one of your co-founders probably, that will be in charge of submitting all the required reports and documents, or somebody that can help. Project leader is responsible for notifying the funding agency and the monitoring agency of any significant concerns and problems. So for any problems, any issue, you have to let us know. Why? Kasi medyo mabigat yung kapalit. I'll explain later on. Um, for every change kasi in the proposal that you have submitted, we have to decide whether this needs approval or you can move on or you can do it on your own. There are non-negotiables like a change in the objective cannot be made solely or cannot be decided solely by the startup. It has to have an express approval from the funding agency. A change in objective would mean that pag pinangako mo sa amin ng um, 50 units, kailangan 50 units, pero nagka-pandemic, ang magagawa mo lang ay 30, then we have to talk kasi at the end of the project, if we do not approve the 30, then we will look for the 30. And alam nyo na siguro kung ano yung ending. Yung ending, sige mamaya. So there. So it's the responsibility of the project leader. So nandito naman kami in every step of the way. You can email us where it's a partnership nga. So we're not ano ba? Ano yung term kanina? uh, command. We're not your ano, but we're here to help you navigate the ways so that you can successfully implement your research project under the grant. So yun yung trabaho namin. Project leader provide technical leadership and directly implement the activities. And yeah, but the startup should ensure that all the project activities are effectively implemented. So next section, please. So yeah, so granted administration. So most of these are internal within the DOST, but still needs to be in the guidelines so that we will all be guided as well. So sino yung secretariat, how are the procedures within us. So sige, monitoring agency, our role is periodic field evaluation to help identify problems, solutions, and remedial actions, prevent delays in implementation. So yun yung role namin. We're really your partners in the implementation. And we want to monitor your progress as well. Kasi pag nag-fail kayo, it's also part of it's also a failure on our part. So we want you all to succeed. So and foreign travel, we have to ensure that you have express approval from us before you travel, before you even book. So yan yung mga trabaho namin. So next section, please. Monitoring evaluation. Yeah, okay. Implementing agency, which is the startup. Pag na-approve na yung project, ang tawag na sa inyo ay implementing agency. Okay. So ang proponent kasi yung nagpo-propose. Pag na-approve na, implementing na. So, your responsibility is you notify any significant concerns and problems. So, because we're part of this. So any failure on your part would also reflect on us. We don't want you to fail. We don't want you to run into problems. So we would appreciate that you would not appreciate. You are required to actually report to us any problems and concerns. and submit all the required reports and documents. And our protection as government is the reports and the documents. So you have to submit all of them so that us as government can justify the release of funds to several private companies which are startups. So alam niyo naman, 'di ba, government has a lot of issues in the past na there's a thin line that we cross, with, ayoko naman sabihin yung term na ano, but yeah, we will be subjected to a lot of evaluation also if we distribute or release funds to several companies. So uh, we should be able to justify also our releases. So that's why we have several reports that you need to submit and several documents that you need to comply to. So yun yung rationale there. We need to also protect ourselves as government. Okay. Next section, please. So responsibility of the program, if it's a program, or the project leader of the startups, nilakihan ko yung text because I wanted to remember this section. So number one, technical leadership and implementing the programs or the project that is approved to you means that you have to adhere to the goals, objectives of the program project that is approved. So you have to follow strictly the approved activities as reflected in the work plan. And you have to deliver your committed outputs and submit required reports, documents on time. So ito yung non-negotiables. The thing here is that we have to be very careful of what we put in our proposal. Pag sinabi natin ito yung activities, we will do a survey, then we have to do a survey. And pag hindi siya nagawa, you have to explain why. And kung may problema, you have to notify us. There are ways naman that we can help. But wag na natin paabutin doon sa end because yung end, pag may hindi kayo nagawa in any of this text, in any of these requirements, then meron talaga siyang repercussions. Deliver committed outputs. Pag sinabi niyo sa amin may system, dapat may system at the end. Pag sinabi niyong 50 units, dapat may 50 units in the end. If you cannot deliver that, then we have to explain. And submit required reports, documents, and time. This is also a non-negotiable. But throughout naman the implementation, we will be there to guide you in how to fill up and how to accomplish the reports. Next section. So wag yang kakalimutan because there are really some repercussions for this. Foreign travel, yeah, I've already discussed that. So kailangan travel report after 1 month. And then technical monitoring, these are the reports that you will submit to the funding agency or monitoring agency. Okay, so merong semi-annual progress report. May mga DOST forms there. Currently kasi nagre-revise sila ng DOST forms for startups. So we'll have to wait for that. But if not, hopefully in time by next year, mailabas na siya. But we need a semi-annual progress report. That's every 6 months. A terminal accomplishment report that is after your project. A list of equipment that is purchased as approved in your budget. Evidence of intellectual property filing whenever applicable. Hindi naman kayo, like if you are into software, hindi naman namin kayo pilitin na mag-file, but it would help actually to strengthen your your IPs if you can protect it to there. But IP, I don't know if but later on may section naman ng IP. Pero sabihin ko na rin, the IP for the research funded by the government belongs to the startup. So don't worry about that. Sa inyo yan, hindi kami kukuha. Hindi kami yung owners. So it will remain with the startup. So next section, please. There. So maraming reports. So hindi ko pa napalitan yung iba. Just use applicable forms there. And if in case that there are problems or situations that that happens that you cannot actually complete the deliverables on time, then you may request for an extension. So ito yung rules that will govern the extension. So we need the report. So these reports, justification why we are extending. But don't worry about this because we will be explaining it. Once you have a proposal, we'll explain this again. Once you have an approved proposal, we'll explain this again. So don't worry about this for now. Okay, so yeah, request for extension should be approved before we can use the grants again. So the extension can be a maximum of 1 year beyond the original duration. If it's a multi-year, kung less than 1 year naman ang implementation within, that has to be determined by the funding agency. The request for extension should be 3 months before kayo matapos, hindi on the day or on the night. Kasi may process pa for evaluating the extension. Next, only 2 extensions are allowed. So wala nang pangatlo. So it's for a total of 12 months. That's 1 year. Okay, next. So yeah, pag natapos yung project at hindi ka nakapag-request ng extension, then you can no longer use the funds. You can also only use the funds if they're within the project duration, the period. So, while waiting for the approval, kung nagkataon naman na wala pang approval, tapos na yung project, then you cannot use the funds. It's temporarily suspended. So, yung sweldo, yung materials, hindi mo siya pwedeng gamitin for that. So, antayin muna natin yung approval. It's also protection for you guys kasi madi-disallow lang. Sayang naman. Okay. So, request for continued funding if this is for multi-year project. So, I will not go through that. Yeah, if something happens, mga force majeure situations, like a lockdown, so hopefully wala nang lockdown next year. So we can temporarily request for suspension, deferment, or change in implementation date. But for suspension, remember that you cannot use the funds. So yung mga taong naka-charge sa grants, hindi sila susweldo. So yun lang naman. And they cannot get it after pag nag-resume yung project. So yung time na yun, wala na talaga. So the total project duration should not change with this deferment, suspension, and change in implementation date. Kung 1 year ang approved, 1 year din yan total, whether you are deferred, suspended, or nag-change ang implementation date. Okay, so next. Okay, suspension can be a maximum of 3 months. So yeah, just if something happens, so sana wag naman because there's a lot of disadvantages there. Change in project title. It's very critical because government documents kasi. So you cannot just, parang pangalan mo lang. Pag binago mo yung pangalan, then some of the benefits, hindi ka makaka-avail, di ba? So, kailangan pang pumunta sa City Hall. So, ganun din yan. So, project title, hindi pwedeng, mas maganda yung title. So, ibahin ko muna. So, kung ano yung na-approve, yun yung gagamitin. And that would also reflect on the budget, the grants that will be used. Objectives also, hindi siya basta-basta. Pag sinabi natin, gagawa ka ng survey, gagawa ka ng survey. Hindi mo pwedeng tanggalin yan in your next submission of the document. So, activities, kung may changes there, you need to have it approved first before you change. And kung magpapalit ng, sana huwag naman, magpapalit ng startup. I haven't encountered this before, but probably let's engage when we get there. Medyo mabigat kasi magpapalit ng startup yung proposal. So yeah. Okay, so in any of the cases, if there are changes for the project title, objectives, activities, and the implementing agency, there should be expressed approval from the funding agency para hindi tayo magka-problem later on. Okay, so next slide, please. Next section. Yeah, financial monitoring. So the funds released to startups shall be available for use within the approved project duration. So pag sinabi natin, we will issue a paper, a document that would indicate there the start of the project. Pag sinabing ang start ay January 1, hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yung pera even if you have it in your account ng December 31. And pag sinabing andun sa paper, nag-end ka ng December 31, hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yung funds even if it is with due ng January 1. So, those are the rules. And the funds cannot be put in a money market, ha? Walang ganun. So, lagay mo muna sa money market habang nag-aantay ka ng document. So, walang ganun, ha? Time deposit, other forms of investment. So, hindi. Just open an account for in the name of the project. Okay. Um, okay, the funds will not be released in full. Yun yung from experience. But we can release the funds in partial or full amounts naman if necessary. Siguro kung maliit lang, baka pwede. Pero our experience is that we will have a schedule of releases agreed before we start. And then startups as implementing agencies are encouraged to open an account in any government depository servicing bank. So mas preferred talaga namin ang government bank, but hindi naman mandatory. You can also open accounts in private banks, and any bank charges shall be borne by the project funds. Okay, yun naman ang nakalagay. Okay, sige. Wait lang. There. But we would still encourage that you open to a government bank. Bakit kamo? Kasi there was one startup in our 15 cohorts before na hindi ayaw tanggapin ng private bank yung government funds kasi they're thinking that it is money laundering. So, medyo nahirapan kami to explain and we sent all the, kami ang nahirapan kasi we sent all the MOA, the project approvals, and so, I don't know if it's the same with the other banks, pero I would like to encourage na land bank na lang kasi sanay na sila dyan. So there, yun lang naman. Project implementation shall commence within 2 months after release of the funds or otherwise reflected in an approval letter. Subsequent funds shall be released pending yung financial reports, and you have to submit the financial reports on how you use the funds pala and other endorsements and requirements. Next section, please. Okay, so tapusin ko lang tong all about grants and then we'll open it up to questions again. Yeah, you can, at the start kasi, may nilagay na tayong budget for, let's say, ang traveling cost ko ay 50,000, ang materials, ang supplies and materials ko ay 120,000 kasi magpapa-workshop ako ng 3. And then, so, yun yung approved. But we can also reprogram it in cases na yung conference mo pala, hindi naman siya inabot ng 120,000. So you can still use the 100 lang. So you can still reprogram the 20,000 in other expenses. So pwede yan, but there's procedures that we need to follow. So we can reprogram and realign. But we have to execute again an approved line item budget. We will teach you how once you have an approved proposal. So don't worry. Okay. But all I'm saying is that the guidelines provide for reprogramming. Kasi mahirap naman mag-estimate at the start, di ba? Estimate lang yon. Okay. Next section, please. Okay, so we will have an approved revised line item budget for every reprogramming that we make. Next section, please. Okay, next section. Okay, so I think you will be given a copy of this so you can look at the other ano lang. So I highlighted the blue kasi yun yung mga, I think the important parts of the guidelines that you need to also study and consider. Okay, financial reports. There's a form for financial reports. So, well, we will also provide it to you. And we encourage that the startup should have CPA, or you can actually outsource it to a CPA outside the startup. So pwede rin naman, yung pambayad sa CPA, you can charge to the grant. So basta meron kayong CPA accountant that can check and sign for the financial reports. So there are several financial reports and other financial requirements. So nandiyan naman yan. Again, we will teach you how. Um, once you have an approved proposal. So next section, please. And okay, so the startups or startup enablers, in case we open a call for startup enablers, so you have the responsibility also to keep an account for your financial and accounting records. So anytime na the COA would want to visit, they can see all your reports. So ito yung medyo binabantayan namin because well, we're using government funds, so we have to be very mindful on how we use the funds. So it has to be recorded every time. So it has to be for the purpose of the project, and any other use is not actually allowed. That is outside the proposal. So we have to be very mindful of that. Kasi pera to ng taong bayan. So hinihiram lang natin actually for so that we can help startups, we can help you. Um, but in return, we also expect you to be mindful of your responsibilities as a recipient of a grant. So yun lang naman. Okay. So next section, please. Hmm. Okay. Pag natapos na yung project, all balances and savings, interests earned, you have to return it to us, of course, so that, government can also use that for other purposes. Pag nag-request ka ng 1 million and hindi mo nagamit yung 500,000 at the end of the project, well, you really have to return all of that. So within 3 months. So pag more than 3, di pa to nabago. Months yan. Okay. So those are all pertaining to the grant. So ang binabantayan lang namin ay yung grant na binigay namin sa inyo. So may records, and then may reports, may vetted by the CPAs, and then all the balances, savings, and interest should be returned. So those are all pertaining to the grant. Now, 13.7, o section 13.7, all income. Ito yung sagot ko din kanina. All income may incurred or generated even within the project timeline may be used by the implementing agency, because this is what the Innovative Startup Act is all about. So, hindi naman namin bibilangin yung income na that you generated during the project period. Sa inyo na yon. So, wag nyo nang i-report sa amin para hindi na namin siya problemahin. So, these guidelines provides for that income to be used by the startups. And even if the income was generated because of the device that we have funded, o gumawa ka ng prototype, na ibenta mo siya. So yung income nun, paano ba? It's still yours. So that's still income. That's not the grant. The grant is yung expense na ginamit mo for making that device. Okay. So hope clear yun, ha? Okay. Next section, please. Non-submission of requirements. There. Non-submission of requirements of all the things that I've said, at saka ni Edward kanina pa. Failure to submit the required financial, technical, and other reports within the prescribed guidelines. So we'll have to take it also. We will undertake legal measures so that you will be compelled to comply. Pero wag na tayo umabot doon. Kaya naman siyang gawin. Assign one of your co-founders. So, to be the lookout for all the submissions needed. Nagawa naman yan some of the 15. But, kaya nyo rin yang gawin. It's just that, diligence in complying with the requirements, because it's not only you who is going to be in trouble, but also us, the DOST. So we're taking a risks. We're taking a risk actually in providing a fund, despite our requirements also and our procedures, so that we can help more startups. Kasi nandyan naman sa law. So why not? Just that this responsibility should be with the startups naman. Okay, so next section please. Maulit ko kaya to mamaya. Okay, hiring. So you can hire people and charge additional people to charge to the project. So yeah. And the hired people will be coterminous with the program or the project approved. Now, if you want to hire them, if you want them to continually work for you, yun pala, then just rehire them as a startup. Pero kayo na yung sasagot sa sweldo niya. So there. Next section. Di pa na-adjust yung mga forms. All applicable forms. So, yeah. No employer-employee relationship. So, please remember that. You don't provide for bonuses and insurance lang when you travel. I think that's allowed. And other benefits, no. It should be the counterpart of the startup. O yun pala. Yun yung mga part of the counterpart. Grant of honoraria. Yeah, may if you're the project leader, so may honoraria ka naman, but the rates are should we should subscribe to the rates of the DOST. So also the salaries, ano ha, hindi yan industry standard. DOST standard yung salaries. Pasensya na, but we have to follow the salaries and the positions that the DOST allows. Kasi kung if you pay for more for one person than the prescribed salary, then ang ma-charge lang sa project ay yung rates ng DOST. All other expense ay sagot na ng startups. So yun. Okay. So kung may aalis naman, especially if it's a project leader, well, you have to notify the startup. So notify means official. And you have to notify the funding agency as well. So may procedures dyan. And the startup should nominate a replacement and we will approve it. So may procedures if the project leader ang aalis. If kung staff naman, hindi na namin kailangan i-approve. Okay, next section please. Yeah, monitoring agency or the funding agency shall approve the designation of the replacement for the project leadership. Yeah, we will not provide, no, hindi siya kasama sa grants. Nasa na ba ako? Additional compensation, benefits, pension, or gratuity who are retired or were laid off during or after termination of the project. So, hindi po kasama yung mga yan. Just the salaries. Next section, please. Okay, so bago pumunta sa equipment, Catherine, I can entertain some questions. Malapit na tong matapos.
Yes, okay. So before we head on to answering the questions in our Q&A box, let's first answer a few questions from our FB page. So first question, would you consider private incubators like Founders Institute in lieu of TBI's requirement?
Okay. Yeah, that can be an endorsement also.
So another question, is this grant limited only to software R&D?
No. So it depends on the program that the funding agency is issuing. So it applies to all the projects that would have a need to provide project funds or grants. But the selection criteria and evaluation will depend on the program, or the scope will depend on the program issued by the funding agency. So yung kaninang in-explain ni Edward, yung 6 areas, So limited lang yun doon for now because that's the only program that we released for today. So yun dun lang kayo maglalaro ng proposal. Other programs may be released or issued by PSHERD, by PICARD, by PCHRD, the other councils, by TAPI, and by the DOST. So there.
Okay, another question is one of the qualification of the startup is that it has to be in operation for a minimum of 1 year to a maximum of 3 years from February to 2020, provided that the business model has not been established. Does this mean the year of operation is counted starting from Feb 2? Does this also mean startups that have started before that date are still qualified provided that they have not yet established their business model?
Hmm. Okay. So if you do not meet the minimum requirement, which is 1 year, 1 year from registration, not operation, registration in DTI and SEC, and not more than 3 years registration. Um, well, we can evaluate it on a case-to-case basis. So meron namang provisions in the guidelines that says that if you don't fall within that period, then uh, an approval by the secretary is needed.
Okay, got it. So
Mhm.
another question from our Q&A box. Um, One of the requirements states about being in operations for 1 year. This covers does this cover from the date of official registration or an actual operations?
It's 1 year from the date, from the time that you submitted the proposal to the date of registration, DTI and SEC. Yun po yung nakasulat. So registration lang.
Okay, so another question is can advertising and marketing be charged to the grant?
Okay. Ah, if it's marketing and advertising as a regular activity of the startup and it's not related to the research, then it cannot be charged to the grant.
Okay,
Okay.
is it also possible to charge consultant abroad to help our startup in terms of business development?
Yeah, that's possible. That can also fall within consultancy fees or professional services.
Okay. So we have a scenario here. We have canceled our business permit last April to avoid paying quarterly fees since our operation is ceased due to the COVID-19 travel ban, and the client is still not accepting visitors in fear of local outbreak.
Uh,
So we'll be planning to re-register it on SEC this month, hopefully this week. Can we still avail of the grant?
uh, technically, no. Kasi it should be registered talaga. And the date of registration, yun yung re-registration mo. But I'm not sure. Baka naman pwedeng pagbigyan. But, submit ka lang ng capsule. Let us see. If it's not approved because of the technicality, then, well, let's try again next year.
Yes. Okay. So another question is, will it be possible if we can implement two or more projects in a program at the same time?
The program will be issued by the funding agency. So similar to our jumpstarting the new economy, the new normal, jumpstarting the economy, the new normal. So that's a program. So ang projects, yun yung individual proposal submitted by the startups. So as the rule implies kanina, is only one project per startup.
Okay. Got it po. So Um,
Mamili na lang kayo doon. Alam ko, maraming areas that you can actually, mamili na lang kayo kung alin doon ang possible.
okay. So I hope we answered your question.
But,
So,
sorry ha, naisip
sure,
ko
ma'am.
lang.
Sure. Miss
Naisip ko
Russell, go
lang,
ahead.
since ang sabi naman sa guidelines is one project approved for for a startup, kung marami kang ideas o marami kang, well, we will still evaluate it naman eh. So you can probably submit several proposals and then we will help you na lang determine which one has, you know, has an advantage in terms of having it approved. So baka pwede yung ganong style. So email nyo lang. Let's see.
Okay. So, another
Pero isa
question.
lang doon ang ma-approve. Sorry, Catherine.
It's okay. It's okay, Miss Russell.
Isa
Go
lang doon
ahead.
ang ma-approve. Huwag aasa.
Okay.
Oh, give chance to others daw.
Yes, true.
Thank you.
So, okay. We have a question, another question. So our company has been registered for more than 3 years already, but we've developed a new product that falls under digitally empowered tools for public service. Can we still qualify for the grant for this specific project?
Okay. The logic behind the 3 years maximum is that in 3 years naman, we actually expect you to be attractive to investors. You're knowledgeable enough that you can market on your own, that you are probably mature enough to operate by yourself. What we want actually is those startups that are really um, struggling, that do not have the resources to even build their prototypes. So those early stage prototypes that truly needs the help and the assistance. So yun yung mga hinahanap namin. And if you can stand on your own, then we'll probably give chance to others. But just to answer technically, you can still propose because there's a provision there that if you do not fall within the requirements, then we need the secretary to have it approved.
Okay. So thank you for that, Ms. Russell. Um, we have a question from Diogenesis. Since the nature of startups are uncertainties, risk taking high failure rate, and expected numerous pivots, if the granted startup failed, what's the repercussions for this? Also, may I ask what shall be the output of the startup to be deemed as successful? Is it positive revenue, development of stable market, number of customer sales conversion, or development of MVP?
Okay. Um, what we are funding actually is the research, and that is explicitly, captured in the project proposal that you will be submitting. We are not funding your startup. We are funding the activities that you will do for research. So, success to us means that you have successfully delivered what it is in the approved proposal. Pag sinabi niyo we will deliver a minimum viable product at the end of 1 year, and this product will be in this quantity with these features and validated with these people, then that's a measure of success. Kasi yun yung nakasulat and yun yung na-approve. So yun yung success. Now, when it comes to the startups that hindi naman natin masabi if you will be successful in your business or not. That is, well, we hope that you will be successful. Pero you do not have to be scared of applying for the grant because that's not our measure. Our measure is how well you will be able to do your research and deliver the outputs that is in our agreed proposal. May repercussions kapag yung pinangako mo sa project proposal is not delivered. Yun ang may repercussions. But for you to fail, it's Well, it's part of the startup culture, diba? We're not afraid of failure as a business. Mm.
Yeah, so I hope you take note of that. So another question, where can we get the salary rate from DOST?
Okay. Once you have your approved proposal, then we will provide you. Once you submit pala a concept proposal, then we'll help you with the line item budget. We will provide you with the rates.
Okay.
Yeah, during the proposal conference.
Okay. So also we are a startup that is less than 1 year in operation and would like to apply. Can we still apply?
Technically, no. Kasi nga may 1 year. Pwede ka naman sa next cycle. But, yun nga, meron namang provisions in the guidelines that in cases na you do not fall within the minimum and the maximum requirement, then we can have it approved by the secretary. Pero, even though it is there, hindi rin siya madali. Kaya, mas madali pang mag-antay ka na lang ng next cycle.
So yes, we have another question from our Facebook page. So is biotech software qualified for the grant?
Yes, if it is part of the research that you have proposed. Kung kailangan siya doon sa proposal, then yes.
Got it, Miss Russell. So do we have more questions? Let me see first. Um, okay. Do we need does this grant need um COA audited by COA?
Okay. So COA audits the use of government grants. So ang first na i-audit niya actually is kami. Kaya nga, we need to be also vigilant in terms of reminding you the submission of the reports, all the compliances to the guidelines. So, kaya rin kami dapat masipag mag-monitor kasi kami yung unang i-audit. So, kung merong violations there, kami yung unang sasagot. So, that's why it's a partnership. So, we're in here together. So, parang ganon. But the COA would also choose to visit the startup as well. So, may mga times na gusto niya rin kayong makilala, makita, at matingnan ang inyong books.
So another question, where do our R&D be? Will it be in the DOST office or our own office? Since you mentioned that you will be mentoring us.
Ano ulit? Sorry, Miss Catherine.
Um, where do our R&D will be? Will it be in the DOST office or our own office?
In your own office, where you are located.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the evaluation. If you have the facilities and the requirements that would allow you to conduct the research.
So
Kung nasa TBI naman kayo, then nasa TBI location, not within the DOST, of course.
so do we have more questions from the attendees?
Yeah. So do you have other questions?
We have do we have a Okay, we've answered all our question in our Facebook. I guess we've answered all the question also in the Q&A box. So, to end this session, we would like to thank you, Miss Russell, Sir Edward from DOST Pressured for giving us. Yes, sorry.
Meron pa po.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought it's done.
Ako, sorry.
It's
Oo.
okay.
Sige, mag-proceed na ako there. I'm also reading some of the questions in the Q&A kaya okay, so let me proceed. Konti na lang ito, pasensya na. But nandun kasi yung importanteng part sa dulo. So you have to actually listen to that part, please. So equipment. So we will allow you to buy equipment through the grant. So dito kami nahihirapan because you know naman government cannot just provide equipment to private companies. And you are private companies, di ba? So we can only do that through bidding. So medyo nahirapan kami in this aspect. So but you are now allowed to procure equipment and procurement procedures. Well, you have to develop your own and we will approve it. Ang catch lang is we will be very strict in terms of the equipment that you will be buying. Kung sinabi niyong one laptop, it should be one laptop. Um, so for an amount of 120,000, for example lang for bumili kayo ng dalawa, pero 120,000 pa rin naman hindi pa rin yung allowed kasi sabi mo one laptop. So yung isa ay sagot mo na. So doon kami strict. So pag sinabi mo one laptop at 120,000, pwede siyang magmura, hindi siya pwedeng mag-over. And then hindi siya pwedeng mag-more than one. And hindi rin siya pwedeng maging zero. So very strict kami doon. Plus, the specifications. You have to submit the specifications. And hindi, kung specifications ng specialty or instrumentation ba, so we have to approve that. Kailangan nyo lang siyang i-submit and then we need to approve the specifications. And we have to ensure that kung ano yung binili nyo, yun yung specs na in-approve namin. Hindi kayo pwedeng, ay mas maganda ito, bilhin ko na lang yon. Or mas mura kasi sa internet. Yun na lang, magkaiba lang sila ng specs. Never mind, pasok naman sa budget. Hindi rin pwede yun. So, remember that we will also be accountable to the grant. So any mistakes in the use of the fund, including that of procuring equipment, that will be part of the repercussions in in the availment of the grant. So we have to be very careful. The other, our initial cohorts, yung 15, alam nila yan before kasi they can buy equipment, pero only those that are housed in our incubators. That's why we have that preference for those who are located in our incubators. Bakit kamo? Kasi anytime that makomplete yung project, we can donate the equipment to the incubator so that the startup can continually use the equipment. Dahil pag equipment granted through government funds, babalik yun dapat sa amin. Hindi naman siya reasonable, di ba? So, we use that as one of the requirements. Kung may equipment, dapat nasa TBI. Because dati, hindi to allowed. Ngayon, allowed na siya. Kaya lang. We still have to be very careful, of course. That's why medyo mahigpit talaga pag equipment. For those startups not housed in any of our TBIs, kung wala naman kayong equipment needs, then okay lang, wala tayong problema. Yun lang yung logic behind why there is a preference for startups in our TBIs. Kasi we can immediately revert to donating the equipment to the incubator. Kasi university siya. That's the safest way for us to retire peacefully. Kung hindi, babalik yon sa amin. Kami yung nakapangalan kasi sa equipment. So, hindi ako makakapag-retire. Pero ngayon, allowed na kayo. It's just that we still need to be careful. So, ito yung requirements. So, please remember. So next section, please. Okay, so recording of equipment. So, both of us, funding agency and the startup. So, ito yung required. Next. And we will inspect, of course. We reserve the right to inspect, assess, and evaluate the equipment purchased. Kasi kami rin yung mananagot. So, wag lang tayo lalayo doon sa specifications. If there is a need to change the specs, kasi wala na yan, obsolete na siguro, or for any reasonable yeah, we can, ano naman, we can revise and then approve again. So, madali naman yon. So, we will expound on this when you have in our proposal conference next year. Okay, we go now to IP, intellectual property. This is also very important. So, in our MOA with you, may nakasulat lang doon that we have ito, the IP under this transaction, which is the release of government uh, funds to a private company, which is the startup, was created with support from a MOA, which is awarded by the DOST. So the Republic of the Philippines has certain rights in the IP. So ano yung certain rights na yon? So next section, please. Oops, wait. Akyat ka. Number 2, please. Yeah. So all provisions on IP is governed by the MOA. So babantayan nyo kung ano yung nakasulat sa MOA. And uh, and the DOST policies, the Tech Transfer Act, kung anong nasasabi doon. Ang nasasabi doon sa RA 1055 or the Technology Transfer Act ay all IPs is vested to the implementing agency. Ibig sabihin, if it's funded by the government, the IP belongs to you. Wala pong kaming ownership on the intellectual property. Sa inyo yan. So, I think merong nag-comment there about that. So, sa inyo po yan. But, yung certain rights would only mean na ito yung mga susunod. So, down please. Okay. So we will request if there's a need for us to access the IP for non-commercial research by a public research organization, we will request it to you then so that, the public may benefit. But may procedures naman dyan, may non-disclosures, yung ganon. So there are also prohibited clauses. We'll review that in the proposal conference, pero don't worry much about that. You have to notify us if there are IP applications, of course. If you're licensing it to somebody, if you're assigning it to somebody after project completion, or if you enter into any other technology transfer agreements. So wala naman kaming just inform us. Yun yung requirement. Inform. Next, please. So we will review your progress even after completion of the project, how you're using your intellectual properties. In case the funds provided to the grantee shall be used for any purpose other than for R&D, so we'll have another MOA for that. Pero dapat wala naman kasi medyo mabigat yun. So the startup shall report to the DOST on the progress. And ito, pataas ng konti, please. Okay. There. Kasi it's very common for startups to be acquired, diba? Sa startups. So if the startup ceases to be a Filipino company, in-acquire kayo ng foreign company, the DOST assumes the rights to the IPs. So ibig sabihin, magma-march in kami, pwede namin kunin yung IP kasi it belongs to the Filipino people. Filipino eh. So, kung magiging foreign company na kayo, the IP belongs to the Filipino people. But, yung may kasunod naman. Kasi I don't wanna do that, actually. Anong gagawin ko doon? Unless the Philippine government is appropriately compensated. So, usap tayo doon sa compensated. So, ito yung susunod. Number 6. Okay, pataas ng konti. Yan. In the case of startups, we're subject to mergers and acquisitions. Dalawa yan that you should be careful of. Within the duration of the project, habang nag-R&D pa lang kayo at may kontrata kayo sa amin, and after completion. So, magkaiba yon na condition. So, if the startup is acquired by a foreign entity, whether during the project or after, wala tayong lusot. The startup should return the grant in full. Kung ano yung na-release sa inyo in the case of ongoing. No, kung completed, kung foreign talaga, sa Tech Transfer Act kasi, nakasulat doon, you have to return it to government, either the IP or compensation for the IP. So, I hope maliwanag po ito sa inyo. Um, there are ways naman for you to comply with this. Make it part of the merger or the acquisition conditions that you will pay for we will pay for the IPs or the grants. So, there. Now, kung local naman ang mag-a-acquire sa inyo, then we're more flexible. Yung foreign lang talaga ang hindi. Sorry naman. Even if it's 20 years, hindi yun. You have to pay the full grant. Okay? Kung local naman, pinaghiwalay natin yung within. Kung nagpa-project pa lang kayo at in-acquire na kayo, then you have to return the grants that are already released to you. Kasi nagpa-project pa kayo, di ba? So, kung ano yung na-release sa'yo, return mo in full. Okay. So, kung after project completion naman, medyo may flexibility. So, basa. If the startup is acquired by a local entity after project completion, within the same period of duration given for the project, the startup shall return the grant in full to the funding agency. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng within the same period of duration? Ibig sabihin nun, there's a 1:1 lead time project duration. And it will apply for the repayment of the grant. So, kung 1 year ang project nyo sa amin, so 1 year, mag-aantay ka pa ng 1 year after project completion, na pag na-acquire ka within that 1 year after project completion, you have to return the grant in full. Kung 2 years ang project mo sa amin, the 2 years yung aantayin mo. Pag na-acquire ka anytime within that 2 years, then you have to return the fund in full. I hope you get that. Return the grant in full, yan ah. But if the acquisition of the merger happened after the timeline, nandyan naman sila attorney Ras, di ba? Attorney Chief, correct niyo ako ha? Pag mali yung sinasabi ko. So kung 1 year ang project mo, then 1 year yung lead time mo, tapos na yung 1 year ulit, doon ka na-acquire, then you don't have to return the grant. Hindi ka na required. So importante yung lead time. Kung kailan yung lead time mag-e-end. So kung 2 years yung project na pinondohan namin sa inyo, may 2 years after matapos, yun yung pag na-acquire ka 2 years after, labas na doon sa lead time na yon, hindi mo na kailangang ibalik ang grant. Gets, no? Pero local companies yan na pag foreign, automatic talaga, you have to return it because it's the money of the Filipino people. Okay, so let me move on. So I hope it's clear, pero we'll explain it again once you're sa proposal conference. Next. Okay, para matapos na. Yeah, revenue sharing. Okay. There's a notice in our MOA with you that the DOST may have a share in all revenues from the commercialization IPs and IPRs. May. So it's not all the time. For the 15 cohorts that we have funded, wala naman kaming kinuha doon na income or a share in the revenues. So it depends. And the revenue shares or royalty payments shall be agreed upon by the parties. So hindi naman siya will be demanded upon you without your agreement. And meron din siya mga colatilla dito that if in that year, if nag-agree tayo na we will have a share, the DOST will have a share in the revenue, pero on a particular year, lugi ka, your financial status did not exceed your break-even annual income, then you're not required to pay the royalties. So lugi ka na, bayad ka pa. So hindi, wala naman. So nice naman kami on that respect. If we choose to still get a share in the revenues. Or if the startup is already a licensee of a state university because the technology belongs to the state university, state, not private universities. Or its technology is DOST, sa RDIs naman ng DOST because it's still a public institution. Okay. Then, saan na ba ako? Then you are not, we will not get a share in the revenue kasi may binabayaran ka ng royalties sa kanila. So, it's not needed. Okay. Next section, please. I hope this is clear. Ayan. If in case there is revenue sharing, then the DOST and the startup shall mutually agree. May mutually agree naman on the percentage and yeah, so we will consult you. Wala naman kaming i-demand. So that's in the guidelines. Okay, so next section, please. Non-monetary revenues may also be converted to cash if we choose to have a share in the revenue. If yon, capital if. Okay. Disposition and termination of grants. Ito na yung last part, but you really have to listen. Ayan, naka-large font, bold, ibang color, naka-underline pa. You have to remember this. The basic requirements for the granting of the funds is that, number 1, performance of the purpose for which the grant is given. Ano yung purpose? Yun yung nakalagay, nakasulat sa proposal. And then, number 2, satisfactory implementation of the grant. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Yun yung in-explain ko kanina. Pag sinabi nyo may system, may system. Pag sinabi nyo 50 units, 50 units. So, in any time naman within the project duration, we can request for a change if it is justifiable naman. But, wag yun ang antayin yung end ng project if there's a justifiable reason for you not to accomplish it. Pero, syempre, we will have to approve it again also and evaluate it. And yung third, proper management of funds. Proper management of funds means that ginagamit mo yung funds for which it is given. Doon lang sa allowed and within the procedures. And it is recorded. It is reported. So yung tatlong yon means it means the success of the project implementation. So you don't have to be worried. Mag-worry ka lang if you have a violation on that 3. So, may hindi ka na-meet, hindi mo nagamit yung funds in a proper manner, hindi mo, yon. So, pababa please. So, in that case, for the violations in any of the 3 requirements, the DOST reserves the right to terminate the grant. And on account of failure, the full amount of the grant released shall be immediately returned to us, the funding agency. So, if meron kang violations yan sa 3, then you have to really return the funds to us. Bakit siya nalagay dyan? Well, number 1, di ba, I've always mentioned, even from the start, that we are accountable to the funds that we are providing to startups. Startups are private companies, so we are really very careful. So there. Also, may agreement naman tayo at the start. So, you really have to be very careful what you put in or what you defend in your proposal. Kasi kung ano yung nilagay nyo, yun talaga yung sisingilin namin. And you're using government grants to perform that, perform the activities in the proposal. Wala na sigurong reason para hindi mo siya magawa unless there are may pandemic, for example, may tsunami, or mga force majeure, or there are really justifiable reasons which can affect our deliverables. But may chances kasi sa taas, provided for in the guidelines, that you can report it to us and we can agree on a resolution or a change. So wala talagang reason for you not to comply with the requirements. And proper management of funds. This is not yours, actually. And this is not even mine. This is not hindi ko to pera eh. Pera to ng taong bayan. And we really have to be mindful of how we use the funds. And we're really working hard in order to provide grant funds for startups kasi there's really a uh, pro- lot of provisions, restrictions to government um, engaging private companies. Siguro alam niyo naman yun, di ba? Yung mga fertilizer, something, issues. So, ayaw naman namin na magkaroon kami ng a lot of issues, especially with the Commission on Audit. And we have to exact yung diligence in protecting also the fund and how it is used. So, I hope you understand. And returning the fund immediately naman is actually needed. Pwede naman natin pag-usapan ano yung immediate. So there. So please remember, performance of the purpose for which the grant is given, it's written in the proposal. So I hope there will be no misunderstanding. Satisfactory implementation of the grant. So what is written in the proposal and what is approved. Proper management of funds. Disbursement of the funds for which it is approved for. So nandun sa LIP. If outside there and outside of the other provisions in these guidelines, then it's not, it will fall also as a violation on this requirement. So I hope you understand. So yeah, careful lang tayo on what we put in the proposal and how we manage the funds after. If there are questions naman, because we understand that this is very new for you, nandito naman kami to advise you properly. It's just that you have to ask um, whenever, when in doubt, just do not follow your heart. Ask us, ha? Nandito naman kami to guide you. So that hindi tayo umabot doon sa compliance nitong termination of grants and return of the grants in full. Okay, so I hope you understand. Next section is actually the end. So these guidelines and all may mga for your comments also, and may mga revisions pa there. So as soon as it is approved and published, it will take effect 15 days after publication. So thank you so much. So Catherine, again, back to you. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Russell. So, since it's almost 12, let's just answer last three questions before we end this morning session. So, we have a question from Acel Castellon. Can we use the 5 million to buy one equipment, for example, ultrasonic extraction equipment?
So yun lang pag gagamitan mo ng 5 million. Hindi. Because that will, procurement of equipment alone does not constitute an R&D activity.
Okay, so from Ma'am Stephanie Uy, regarding laptops and other equipments acquired through and during the grant, is that going to be owned by the startup or returned to the DOST?
It will be owned by the startup. With the
And
conditions above, ha?
okay, got it. So for the last question about donation, we have a MOA with an LGU to donate our product. Can we donate to the LGU, not the TBI?
Donate the product.
Yes, donate the product. Can we donate the product to the LGU and not to the TBI?
I don't think there is a requirement for you to donate to the TBI, the product. So if you have an agreement with the LGU, then yeah. It's LGU.
Okay, so I guess that's all the questions we have for you, Miss Russell. Thank you so much to you and Sir Edward for giving us this valuable information. Surely our participants here have learned a lot. So, and to everyone who attending this session, thank you so much as well. So, to end this program, I would like to again give the virtual floor to Ms. Russell to give us the closing remarks.
Sorry pala ang closing. Okay. Um, yeah, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, CDO Bytes, for holding this public consultations, and thank you for all of those who listened and who asked questions. If you can, yeah, if you can type also your questions for those who are not, which are not answered during this session, please go to our website. It's RITD, and then we'll answer it from there. Or you can email us also. I know that most of you probably, or some of you probably are confused now or discouraged for in availing of the grants. Uh, well, I tried to explain earlier why there are provisions there and the reason for us to follow, because not there is no such thing as free lunch naman, and we tried our best to provide assistance in any way we can, and in any way we can means that we're also protected, and we also protect the people's money in that manner. So don't look at it as a um, as a prohibitive um, aspect, yung mga requirements in the law. It's a protection also for for you as somebody who is a beneficiary of the grant, for us who are accountable of the grant, and also for the Filipino people who have, galing kasi sa kanila tong grant na to. So this is not something that is free for us to use. Kailangan talaga we comply to the requirements, and we have to show um, that we are trustworthy enough, that we are worthy enough to receive, and professional enough to receive such grants. So yun lang naman. And I hope that this will not discourage you to avail of the grant. If there is any confusion, kindly reach out to us, and then we will help you. You can also ask the 15 initial startups that we have. Actually 20 sila that we have already funded and supported. And I think that from their stories, from their testimonies, that you can get to learn how the grant actually helped them in their business. So there. So I hope that we can see you next time, and we can see your proposals in the future. So thank you so much, CDO Bytes. Thank you everyone for listening.
So thank you, Miss Russell. So don't go just yet. Before we end, let's first take a group photo. So kindly turn on all your cameras.
Halika, Edward. Okay.
So put on your best smile.
Kayo na mag-screenshot ah.
Hindi kami makabidyo.
We've promoted you to panelist already, so you can turn on your cameras.
So who's taking the photo? Can we? Okay.
Ito lang para
On Hi's queue, we have 3 pages of participants. All right.
Okay, on my cue. 3, 2, 1. On the next page.
Ayaw naman nila magbukas.
Ayaw nila mag-video.
3, 2, 1.
Dari yan, at least my names.
Andiyan pala si Sir Joel. Hello, Sir Joel. Hello, Rayjan.
Yeah, hello.
Lunch.
Hindi kami makalabas sa video. Kumusta kayo dyan? Keep safe.
Please wait.
Hello,
On to
Oh, hindi kasi makapasok sa video eh.
Si Tito Sol. Tito Sol ba to ng DOST 11?
and on to the last page.
Tariba yan ng UPV.
Ah, okay. UPV pala.
3, 2, 1.
Alright.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so
All right.
Can we request na lang the panelists to stay? We'll have one group photo na lang before we wrap up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Sagot pa din eh.
Nakamute ka pala.
Nakamute pa ako.
Alright.
Ayun na lang.
Yay!
Congrats, congrats.
Thank you, CDO B.i.t.e.s.
Nag-ang yung ano ko eh.
Hey, thank you so much.
Picture naman tayo. CDO
Okay.
B.i.t.e.s. Pakita naman kayo.
Pwede bang pa-document ng mga questions?
Yep, mag-generate naman siya.
Okay. Sige, sige.
So far, binilang ko naman, we have, I think, 73 questions.
Wow.
Okay. Oo, kasi tingnan natin, maski yung mga hindi ko nasagot, hindi natin nasagot kayo. Okay.
Okay.
Sige, picture tayo before we part ways for lunch.
Yes, okay.
Diba? Nag-ang kasi yung look eh. Kaya dito ako sumisiksik kay Edward. Yung mga mapuputi kong staff.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Isa pa.
Parang mayor lang.
Sige, save ko lang po. One more. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you, CDO.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Maraming
job.
salamat.
Congrats. Good
Thank
job
you.
on the public consultation sa
Thank you.
BIS.
Thank you.
Keep
Salamat.
safe,
Sure,
everyone.
Ingat na kayo.
Oo nga eh. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay. Thank
Pag
you.
we owe you, milk
Keep
tea.
safe, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Happy lunch.
Happy lunch. Bye-bye.
One down.